Hi. My voice is not working today.
The moon shines red, rainy skies ahead, and her heart beats fled. Woke up in her bed to the moonlight.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, and hello for the first time if you are new. I make a lot of videos like this one, and my name is Tatum. I am 22. That pains me to say, but it's true. I don't know how I got that old that quickly, but we're just gonna roll with it. So this video is a part 2, and I made a part 1 that I will link up here and down below in the description box. I talked in that video about a medical issue that I almost died from, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the medical complications that you can get from an eating disorder. I just talked about one specifically in part 1. But before we get started with the video, I'm going to start with a disclaimer yet again. I would just like to say that I am not a doctor, I am not a dietitian, I am not licensed to provide medical information or medical or nutritional advice to anybody. All of the information that I'm providing in this video is based off of my own personal experience with having an eating disorder and from various sites on Google and from what I witnessed in treatment with others. I'm trying my hardest to be as accurate as possible, but know that you should do your own research and talk to your own medical providers before taking anything that I say as fact. Also, just because you have some of these does not mean that you have an eating disorder, and vice versa. Again, that's not something that can be confirmed by me, only by yourself and by a professional. Anyways, now that we're done with the disclaimer, I'm gonna get into the video. Okay, so future me in editing, I am so sorry. The lighting near the end of this video is absolutely terrible. It's just trash. And that's because it was daylight savings and I was not aware of that. Don't tell me how I stayed unaware for 2 days straight, but it happened. I didn't want to redo it. So you get what you get. And really, you can't expect much else on my channel, that is. Nobody watches me anyways. I'm going to start with all of the medical issues that I obtained through my own eating disorder. And yes, I'm going to list other ones that did not affect me as well. I'm trying to cover everything. The vast majority of medical problems that I'm going to talk about today mainly have to do with anorexia and bulimia. And I know I talk about my own eating disorder on here a lot, but I don't have experience with other eating disorders, and I am informed on them. However, because I don't have that personal experience, I don't feel that it's my place to speak on them as much as I speak on anorexia. And I know that that's the eating disorder that's talked about the most, even though it's the least common eating disorder. And I apologize that that's mainly what I talk about. But again, I don't have experience with the other eating disorders. And I think that that information is better provided by other recovery YouTubers that have gone through those eating disorders. I would just like to inform everybody that doesn't know that eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness, and a good portion of that is from people that have committed suicide. So it's very, very serious. That's a terrifying statistic. That's absolutely terrifying. So I just thought that I would share with you guys some of the things that can happen, both long-term and short-term, that are very dangerous for your health. The first medical complication is gastroparesis, which I talked about in the first video, so I'm not really going to get into it, but it is a GI issue that I struggled with greatly throughout the history of my eating disorder, and if you want to know more, then watch part 1. Other gastrointestinal issues are common in eating disorder patients as well, and although I'm not listing a lot of those here, you can find that information on various different sites, also just through your own experience. The next complication on my list is cardiac issues, and this can mean a number of different things. The most common is bradycardia, I think that's how you pronounce it, and that is a low heart rate. But a less common thing that can happen is you can develop tachycardia, or tachycardia. I have it, and I don't even know how to pronounce it correctly, but that is the opposite. It's an accelerated heart rate, and this is something that I developed after I went into treatment. So I didn't have any cardiac issues until I actually went to treatment. And then after I finished weight restoration and everything else, then these cardiac issues set in. And actually, that is what happened with a lot of my medical problems. I didn't have them until treatment. So my only theory with this is that my body was in survival mode, right? So it didn't want to tell me that all of these things were wrong. It was just trying to survive. And then as soon as I gave it fuel, it was like, okay, well, let me tell you what you've done to me. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's the most plausible thing that I can think of. I wore a heart monitor 2 different times because I had some mild chest pain every once in a while, and I would get palpitations, and this was actually before I went into treatment. So I apologize for saying that I didn't have any issues before I went to treatment, because that's not correct. But there was nothing to go off of when they got the results back from my heart monitor tests. And then when I wore a heart monitor a 3rd time in treatment, they picked up some stuff. And at this point, I started having different symptoms, which were the symptoms of tachycardia. And then they sent me to the ER, and then they sent me to a cardiologist. And the cardiologist is who confirmed that I had tachycardia. And they also told me that I had a heart murmur in there, like it was nothing. They were like, oh, and I hear your heart murmur. And I was like, excuse me, come again. I don't know if that was the result of my eating disorder or not. I may never know, but it's still something that I take medication for, but it has improved a lot. I wish I didn't have it at all, but that's what can happen with eating disorders. Sometimes not all of the medical issues are resolved once you're done with treatment. I thought that as soon as I went into treatment and I was weight restored and everything else, that I wouldn't have any problems like that. And I didn't realize that I actually was messing myself up for the rest of my life. There are other cardiac problems that can happen as a result of your eating disorder as well. For instance, your heart can shrink. It's not uncommon. You can have heart attacks, even heart failure in some circumstances. I know somebody that had heart failure. I'm sharing all of these things because I want the point to be pushed very hard that eating disorders are not glamorous as they are often portrayed. And you might have already known that before watching this video, but I'm just reminding you again. The next complication is osteopenia, and we've all heard of osteoporosis, which you get in old age. It's when your bones are really brittle and weak and they can break easily. It's most common in females, but osteopenia is essentially pre-osteoporosis. And this is something that I was diagnosed with in 2020 when I had a bone density scan. And that is another thing that terrified me to my core, because I learned that I had potentially caused damage that I will have to deal with for the rest of my life, even when I'm 60, and I might not even think about the fact that I ever had an eating disorder. My body will remember, which I absolutely hate the thought of. This is reversible to a degree if you develop it in your late teens to early 20s, so I still have a chance of not having to deal with this for forever, which is why I take calcium and vitamin D every day, because those are both really good for bone health. In some very severe cases, you can also develop osteoporosis itself, which is very scary. And I think that this is most common with anorexia and orthorexia, but don't quote me on that because I don't know for sure. Besides just your bones, your muscles can atrophy as well. And this is because your body is eating them. It's consuming itself, essentially. And this is one reason that the heart shrinks with cardiac issues, is because your heart is a muscle. So your body is eating your heart, which is just absolutely terrifying. I'm very, very grateful that that did not happen to me, because heart issues do run in my family already. So I'm very grateful. And if that's something that's happened to you, I'm extremely sorry. Another thing that can happen is you can develop ulcers. And a lot of people think that this is just common with bulimia, but it's Another thing that can happen is you can develop ulcers. And a lot of people think that this is just common with bulimia, but it's actually fairly common with anorexia as well. I don't know about other eating disorders, but I know that with anorexia, your stomach acid can do something that causes the development of ulcers. Like I said, I'm not a doctor. I don't really know the whole medical side of it. I had a scope done in 2018 or 19, I can't remember for sure, but it's also called an endoscopy, and it's essentially where they just put this like tube thing down your throat while you're passed out, and it has a camera on it and takes pictures and stuff. They sometimes do biopsies, which they did for me, and it was revealed that I had 3 ulcers. So they were very painful. They were not fun to have at the time. And I almost wonder if this was part of the reason that my gastroparesis was so painful. And these ulcers were in my stomach. The next complication that I'm going to talk about is iron deficiency anemia. And this is something that I struggled with throughout the entire history of having my eating disorder. And to begin with, I don't eat the food that's most high in iron, which is red meat. I don't eat red meat or pork, and that's not because of any eating disorder related thing, but I was raised like that by my mom because my mom's side of the family has a lot of heart problems. So she just raised me to not eat red meat or pork. So I already wasn't eating those foods to begin with, and then throughout having my eating disorder, I had a very low intake of food and wasn't ever meeting my nutritional requirements. I guess I wasn't eating my nutritional requirements either, but so I had consistently low iron, and this caused a lot of symptoms. You can Google them if you want to. I'm not going to list them here because I'm trying to not make the video super long, which I'm sure it's going to end up being anyways, but if you're really interested, you can Google them. Low iron is very common in people with eating disorders, and specifically women, but that's just because as women we already lose iron every month through our cycle anyways. But it's also important to note that it's not just women with eating disorders that develop anemia, and it's not just women that develop anemia in general, and females without eating disorders aren't the only ones that develop anemia. I switched to the word females because I've heard that the way that I say woman is wrong, and I can't seem to change how I say it, no matter how hard I try. And now I've just pointed that out to you, so you're welcome. For years, I had something called postural hypertension. I think that's how you say it. And this caused things to go black every time I stood up. And for me, that was a sign that my iron was low, because that changed as soon as I got iron infusions, and that didn't happen to me anymore. So some other telltale signs for me are bruising easily, more easily than normal for me. I already bruise easily, which is a genetic thing, but bruising more easily than normal, numbness and tingling, excessive tiredness, stuff like that. And eating disorders can also lower your metabolism a lot, which can also result in a lot of these symptoms like low energy, etc. I said etc. because I don't know the other symptoms of low metabolism. Another very common symptom of eating disorders is low blood pressure. And I had this again throughout the whole history of my eating disorder. It's actually the first symptom that I developed. And I will say, again, my blood pressure runs a little bit lower than normal naturally because I inherited it from my mom's family. I inherited a lot of things from my mom's family, apparently. But this was lower than my normal. And it was the first thing that I was diagnosed with. I think, but I'm not positive, I think this is normally caused by dehydration, which is my next symptom or medical complication, whatever you want to call it. I was so chronically dehydrated that when I went into treatment for the very first time, they weren't able to get a blood draw from me. And dehydration can also cause UTIs and cardiac issues and seizures and hypovolemic shock. I think that's how you say it. And it can also cause kidney issues, which is the next symptom that I'm getting into. This at one point caused kidney stones for me. So that's fun. You can also develop kidney failure, which is also called renal failure. And when I was in treatment the second time, they told me that something was wrong with my kidneys, but that only lasted for a little while. I can't remember what it was. Another thing that can happen, and I have many more, but another thing that can happen is hair loss. And this is again something that I did not develop until I went into treatment. Gastritis is another one. GERD is another thing that you can develop and that I developed. And this is something that I still take medication for. And I'm pretty sure that it's very common in patients with bulimia as well, and people that don't have eating disorders at all. You can also develop something called lanugo, which is this like thin, soft hair that grows all over your body. And it's not something that I developed, but I think that your body creates it to help preserve heat in some way, which goes along with feeling cold all of the time, which is a symptom of having an eating disorder. And I did feel cold all the time, but I never developed lanugo. Something called amenorrhea is another thing that you can develop if you are a female that has an eating disorder. I think specifically, again, anorexia, but I don't know that for sure. It's the loss of your period, and it used to be required in the DSM-5 to make the diagnosis of an eating disorder, which is just absolutely ridiculous because then you're ruling out anybody that's not a female. This, for me, was like a marker that I had an eating disorder. I only developed this at the very height of my eating disorder when I was 19. It was not long lasted, but I felt like until this happened to me, I didn't have an eating disorder, which isn't true at all. And I think that you should know that this is different for everybody. This is completely based off of your own bodily genetic makeup, and your weight is not the only indicator. So just because you lose a certain amount of weight doesn't mean that you're going to lose your period. Some people never lose their period, even if they're significantly underweight. So please don't think like I did and think that that's what makes you sick, because it's not true. I'm sorry if the lighting keeps changing and it's not good at some point of this video because we have had a storm all day long. So another thing that I know from experience can happen is your vision can become really crappy when you have an eating disorder. And this happened to my already terrible vision that I was blessed with, just from, again, my genetic makeup. Something that I learned from treatment is that brain scans of people with eating disorders actually look different than the brains of people that don't have them. And from one eating disorder to the other. So somebody with bulimia will have a different looking brain scan than, for instance, somebody with anorexia or with binge eating disorder. And different parts of their brain will light up with different disorders. And there will be large portions of your brain that aren't lit up at all. And apparently it takes years of solid recovery to actually make the brain light up in all of the ways that it's supposed to again. I know that my brain didn't feel like it worked efficiently. I was in a constant state of brain fog all the time. The lighting looks like it's getting so bad. What is happening? More common things that can happen when you have bulimia are popped blood vessels in or around the eyes, swollen glands in the neck, puffy and swollen face, and this is caused by the exertion from purging. Fortunately, this one does go down. It's not permanent, at least that's what I've heard. But this is the reality of it, you guys. This is what can happen. And it's not fun. Like I said, it's not pretty, it's not glamorous, it's tragic. You can also develop electrolyte imbalances, and this can happen with other eating disorders, I believe, but not to the extent that they happen with bulimia, because you're losing electrolytes through purging. Some more severe things that can happen from purging are you can get a tear in your esophagus, which is an emergency, and your stomach can rupture as well, causing death. And the gravity of that just breaks my soul into a million pieces. There's a recovery YouTuber named What Mia Did Next. I love her channel. She made a video all about that, which you might have seen. You can stunt your growth. That probably happened to me. Who knows how tall I would have been. Weirdly enough, I grew an inch after treatment, which just baffles my mind. And I was 19. So I don't know how that happened, but apparently it's not as uncommon as I thought, because it actually does happen to people. Your teeth can erode from stomach acid. This is why bulimia is so often diagnosed by dentists. This is not a full list of things that can happen when you have an eating disorder, so I would do your own research. I hope that this video was helpful and informative, and it's getting really dark, so I'm gonna go. There is a storm setting in, so I hope that you guys liked the video. Okay, bye. Oh man.